Hello, everybody. It's so quiet now. Oh my goodness. Hi, thank you all for coming. I'm so excited to see so many people. And thank you for breaking the rain. It's a miserable evening, isn't it? And welcome to everybody in the room. Do you want to say hi to the people on Zoom? And welcome to everybody on Zoom. Thank you all for coming. And this is just it's so nice to see so many faces and friendly faces, and such a testament to how much interest there is in kindness. So thank you for joining us to help us celebrate the launch of the Sussex Centre for Research on Kindness. So my name is Jillian Sandstrom. I'm a senior lecturer in the psychology of kindness, and I work in the School of Psychology. I'm going to do some very brief introductions. Over here we have Robin Banerjee, who's the founder of the center, and here we have our special guest, Claudia Hadman, and she will introduce our panelists later who are up here, though. You want to wave? Hello. Okay, so yes, here's the plan for tonight. So I'm going to talk for a couple minutes. Claudia is going to talk about the book, The Keys to Kindness. Then we're going to have our panel discussion. So we have Martin Spinelli talking about kindness in schools. We have Nikki McCrudden talking about kindness in the workplace, and Liz McDonald talking about kindness in the community. And then at the end of that, we'll have a Q&A, and then we have our book signing, and there's some cookies left. Yes, that's the plan. So I just wanted to share a little bit about the history of the Research Center. How did it come about? So this all started with Robin, who did a lot of work looking at social emotional learning in the classroom. And it seems that a lot of the focus has been looking at children and thinking about how can we fix them, right? But it isn't just about the kids, it's about the context. And if the whole school is kinder, that's going to help the kids, and we don't have to focus on, in making the kids seem like the problem. So Robin sort of came to this realization and noticed that there were lots of people across the University of Sussex who are doing research that feels related to kindness, even though not everybody's calling it kindness. And so he started bringing people together into a network of researchers. And then I have a slide for this. And then that has sort of turned over time through some generous funding into the new Sussex Centre for Research on Kindness. And so I was hired to be the director of the center, the inaugural director of the center. So our vision for the center is sort of threefold. Obviously, we're situated in the university, so part of the plan involves doing academic research on topics related to kindness. But also, we want to make sure we're giving away that research and making sure it's reaching people who can use it outside of the ivory tower. And finally, we want to do our part in helping shine a light on kindness. And so I'm so grateful to all of you for helping us do all of those things today. So one of the things that we've done already is the kindness test, which is the basis for Claudia's book that she'll be talking about later. So this was a project in collaboration between the University of Sussex and BBC Radio 4. It was available to the public in the summer of 2021, and we had over 60,000 responses from all over the UK and around the world. Huge range of ages of people who responded, and we asked people loads of different questions. You'll hear a little bit about some of the data from the kindness test today. Robin's going to give us a few snippets, and of course, Claudia will be talking about it in her book. We also have an online distance learning course. So we've been offering this since spring last year, and it's a postgraduate certification course that has 4 different modules that you can do in any kind of order. And we have a bunch of our students here with us now. You guys want to give a cheer? And so we're coming up to our 1-year anniversary, and our first cohort has graduated. I've been teaching on the course, and it's just the nicest teaching ever. We have such a really engaged group of students, as you can tell, bringing all of their lived experience and making it a really interactive kind of environment. We're looking forward. We're so glad to have so many of you here with us tonight. I'm looking forward to finally meeting you in person. We also wanted to tell you about the Kindness Corner. This is Carrie. She's outside right now, I think. You might have seen her out there. And she's doing a placement with the Research Center for the entire year. And she, during the course of the year, had created something called a kindness corner. And as she likes to say, I sort of approached her with this idea. I said, Carrie, I'd like us to have a kindness corner. I don't know what that means. And so she sort of helped invent it. And so what we did is we put together a set of 5 different kind of boards. So there's one board that is a kind act a day. So we have some suggestions of activities that people can perform. A board that's all about how kindness can feel a bit complicated sometimes, and people could vote on what they thought the main barrier was to kindness. We had a share your kindness board where people could put up little post-it notes. And we also had a board talking about some of the research that's happening at Sussex. And I mustn't forget the origami. So we did some origami classes, and the idea was to teach people how to do it so they could give away what they made to someone else. So I've got a couple pictures just because it's so lovely and heartwarming. So over here on the left is the board with the kind acts a day under the little flaps, and here you can see some of the origami creations. And here's what is underneath some of those flaps. And so we toured the Kindness Corner around World Kindness Day last year. So it went to the Student Center and the library, the meeting house, and it's currently in the psychology building. There's some of the post-it notes that people left. And then I just wanted to talk, I just want to make sure you know what kinds of things we are doing. So I wanted to tell you very briefly about 2 different consulting jobs that we've been doing. So Robin's been doing some work with the bar. So we did some focus groups with more than 20 barristers, asking them various questions about kindness at the bar. We've done some thematic analysis on their responses and written up a little report. And hopefully the next step is to sort of co-produce some activities to help make some changes to make the bar a kinder place. And I've been doing a consulting project with an organization called Neighborly Lab, which is a think tank, and they've got some money from the Lottery Corporation to bring communities together by promoting more interactions between essential workers and people who live in the community. So they hired me to advise on how to design their interventions and do the analysis with the data that they collected. So that was just a sneak preview of some of the things that we've been doing, just to give you ideas in case there's any way that you think you might like to work with the Research Center. So I'm going to pass things over to Claudia now, who's going to talk for the next 20-30 minutes about her book, The Keys to Kindness.
Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. Really lovely to be here today. And thank you, everybody who's made it through the rain to be here. But it's also really nice to know that we've got loads of people watching online at home or elsewhere as well. And it's lovely to be here for the official launch of the centre, because there is so much good research going on at Sussex into kindness. And the good news about kindness, as you'll see from the Kindness Corner, is that there is a lot of kindness around, and there is more than you might think. I wonder if we can get to my, yeah, that'd be brilliant. And so in the kindness test, which we will talk about some more later as well, 59% of people told us they had received an act of kindness within the last day. And for a quarter of those, it was within the last hour. So the world may feel bleak and as if there isn't a lot of kindness around, but there are these kind acts happening all the time. And in the Keys to Kindness, what I'm saying is that we probably are kinder than we think, and we could be kinder still. And then looking at all the evidence from Sussex and from around the world as to how we might go about doing that. And I want to show you that kindness is not something soft or weak. It is a strength in a way. It could be our hidden strength. And I'm going to demonstrate that you can be kind and still be winners as well. It doesn't mean that you can't. And of course, kindness benefits the recipients. That is the point of kindness. But it also benefits our own well-being and even our physical health. And I think that is okay. And it's okay to be kind, knowing that you might get something back from that, as long as it's authentic. Then I don't think we should shy away from the fact that there are benefits to being kind, because after all, what we want is more kindness in the world. And of course, when we look around the world, it's clear that there is lots of cruelty as well, inevitably. It's clear there are a lot of polarized opinions. There are a lot of people arguing. We're facing very serious threats, climate change, etc. I won't list all those. So what we need is cooperation more than ever. And at a personal level, we need compassion, we need care. And we need to recognize, appreciate, and value kindness. And by a self-selecting audience here who's chosen to come here, I'm sure you all do that. But kindness, we know, it's what relationships are about, really. It's at the heart of our relationships with other people, and it is a fundamental part of human nature. And so what I wanted to do was to try to unlock some of its mysteries in a way, to say, what can the best research tell us about how to be kindness to each other? Now, kindness, compassion, and empathy are all linked, and within academia, there's all sorts of debates about how to define each of them. To my mind, kindness means, and many others use this definition, means doing something with the intention of benefiting somebody else. And I say intention there because obviously it doesn't always work out the way you plan, but you're intending it to, and that's a really important part of it. And it can range from making a cup of tea to volunteering, or to really listening to somebody, or to acts of heroism. There's something I look at in some detail, or to forgiving somebody, or talking to somebody who's lonely, or smiling at a stranger. It can be this whole range of things right through to saving a life. So it can, I would count all of those as kindness. And you might have read Steven Pinker or Rutger Krugman's books arguing that humans are on the whole better than we think, and getting kinder, you know. And people will say, but you see these awful things, but we don't now, I hope, go out for the evening for fun to watch a hanging, for example. You know, we don't, I hope that's not what you're going to do next, because that's not very nice. It's really not very nice. But much of the time, kindness really is our default, despite the bad things that happen. You know, if somebody were to collapse here right now, everybody here would be very keen to try to help, and concerned to know afterwards they were all right. Please don't collapse now. But everyone, believe me, would try to help. And it's not just adults. The research shows that even toddlers can be kind. Now, you may think of the terrible twos and tantrums, but there are really lovely, really sweet experiments. These are some of my favorites, where toddlers actually want to be kind if they're given the opportunity to. And there's lovely experiments where they get people to, parents to pretend they've, say, you know, hurt their foot or their head. And by the age of 2, even by the age of 2, toddlers will offer hugs or pats or kisses or words of concern 49% of the time, which isn't bad for a 2-year-old. You know, half the time is not bad. And the comparative psychologist from the Max Planck Institute, Michael Tomasello, he calls toddlers indiscriminate altruists because they will help anyone. So they'll help other children and they'll help adults too. And he did all sorts of, regardless, you know, what they might get in return. And he did lovely experiments where they did things like, they got people to, let's see if this moves on. Does not. Yes, it does. Yeah. So they would have, say, adults carrying a pile of magazines, and the adult wants to open the cupboard but can't open the cupboard door, and they wait to see whether the toddler will help them. And even at 18 months, the vast majority, it's something like 91% of toddlers will open the door for them, and even leave the then they make it harder by making sure they're playing a game they really like, and they will even leave the game that they're playing in order to help the adults. And then they make it even harder that they have to leave the game and climb over some plastic obstacles. And still, the vast majority of the time, they will go and help. And in the videos of it, it's so sweet. Their chests are sort of puffed out with pride. They're so pleased to have had the chance to help. They want to be, if you like, mini Samaritans. And as children get older, they begin to understand others' perspectives and to act more kindly. Robin here has done lots of work on this, often in surprisingly sophisticated ways. In Canada, I've gone back to that one, which I did not want to do. I daren't touch it so that I don't go back to, I don't want to cut off the Zoom people. Don't worry, Zoom people, we won't cut you off. Oh, lovely, thank you. In Canada, the psychologist John Tyler Binfett done lovely studies on this, and he asked 10 to 11-year-olds to plan 5 acts to carry out over the next week. And they included things like helping a neighbour with their shopping, They said, I'll give my brother some pizza, but some were really highly thought out. There was one boy who said he would be careful not to mention his mum to his friend because he knew his friend's mum had died the previous year. And that's quite complex and sophisticated to think of that and to work that out. It's showing perspective taking of the other person. It's showing real restraint as well. And well, when Professor Binfet, he repeated this with teenagers, and he found that they were just as good at carrying out planning and then carrying out these kind acts. Now, I'm telling you about all these kindnesses, but inevitably the world doesn't always feel like that. We watch the news and we see bad things happen. And on the whole, that is because bad news is what news is. You know, if 100 people were killed in Brighton last night, were murdered in Brighton last night, we need to know that. The fact that 100 people weren't murdered in Brighton last night really isn't news. But inevitably, those things become salient, and we know that negative things are always more salient. So if you show people a photograph of a crowd of faces, people are much quicker at picking out the angry face than the smiling face, say. You know, we need to notice when you need to notice a bear is following you down the street. You don't need to notice that and that there's a person in the street in the same way. And even online, yes, it's true, there is plenty of hatred, there are pylons, there are death threats, there are awful things. But even online, there is loads of kindness as well. There are people supporting each other, people with, say, very rare conditions, finding the only other people with rare conditions and supporting each other in those, or people making you videos on, just for the sake of it, on how to mend your boiler. I used loads of those and can now mend my own boiler. So they're sharing their skills without expecting anything in return. There is always kindness there as well. And even on social media, there are people, yes, some people are, you know, being horrible or showing off, but again, people are doing things just to entertain other people. And you'll have your own favorites, but on Instagram, I like Herbert Doggins. And Herbert Doggins just belongs to somebody I know and has his own sort of character that she has created. He'll put things like had a bath, it was awful, and things like that. And she's created this it is his character that feels like it, but she's created this just to entertain other people. How kind is that? You know, I think it's a nice thing. Now, Gillian mentioned the kindness test, and in the book I talk a lot about the research that we found. It was also the basis of a Radio 4 series called Anatomy of Kindness, which you can still find on BBC Sounds, featuring Gillian and Robin and all sorts of other people here. So this was an online study. Robin was the principal investigator, and I like to think of him as the professor of kindness, and he is very kind. Anyone who knows him will know that. And then we launched it on All in the Mind, the program I present on Radio 4, which is about psychology, neuroscience, and mental health. And we also launched it on Health Check, which I present on the BBC World Service. 60,000 people took part from 144 countries, and it's given us a really rich understanding of how kindness works in everyday life. There's more I want to ask Robin about that later, but I'll share a few findings with you now. One of the findings was that 2/3 of people, both young and old, thought that kindness had either stayed the same or declined during their lifetimes. So not such a good one there. But the good news was 2/3 of people thought that people have become kinder as a result of the pandemic. And this seems like the perfect time to kind of harness that, to say, well, how can this carry on? If people had all these neighborhood WhatsApp groups and things like that, how can these things carry on? But we asked people how they were kind. These were the top 5 ways people said that they were kind. I help people when they ask. I don't mind doing favors for friends, slightly grudging, I think, that one, but hey ho, at least they're doing them. Open doors to let people through, help strangers pick things up, and having concerned feelings for people less fortunate than them, which was an interesting one that people were putting on that list, something where they were feeling concern rather than necessarily doing something. And it's striking, I think, if you look at these, how mundane and everyday they are. And some people might say, well, that's just politeness, but I think there is more to it than that. These things are happening all the time. And they are, you know, drops in an ocean, but, you know, we know what lots of drops make. And 3/4 of people told us they receive kindness from their friends or family quite often or nearly all the time. And as well as collecting all sorts of quantitative data on everything from, we looked at well-being and values and religion and personality. We asked people what the last kind thing they did for someone else was, and what the most recent kind thing someone did for them was. And so we have 120,000, because there were 60,000 people, and they did 2 of these, 120,000 little moments of kindness. And we have all those in a spreadsheet. And I just like going and looking at that spreadsheet, just dipping in, just for fun. I mean, you need a hobby, just for fun, dipping into it, because it's like the opposite of doom scrolling. And Gillian's done research on kindness scrolling, deliberately looking for kindness things. It's like the opposite of that. It is, they are so moving, these moments. There are lots and lots of cups of tea being made, loads of cups of tea, which is lovely, because you can't have too many cups of tea, hence having tea. And tiny kindnesses, like, you know, holding the gate open for someone and things like that. But it's clear kindness can take many forms. Like my friend gave me a shark's tooth, which was nice, or a man was making huge bubbles on my city street corner. Playing bridge and didn't double. I assume not double. I can't play bridge, but I'm assuming that's a nice thing to do, a good thing to do, not a bad thing. Some curious ones. I quite liked this one. I gave the pencil back. Driving to the beach, and I hate beaches. Interesting one there. I like this one. My neighbour gave me some batteries and chicken stock cubes when I needed. I don't know that recipe, and I'm not sure I like the sound of it, but you know, it's nice that they gave it to them. And this one really does beg the question, how? I made the postman happier. I will not ask any more about that. But what is striking is that people are really, really kind and thoughtful. There's some lovely ones. Taking your dog to a show and not being able to erect a gazebo, and all these people rush to help. I like this one. Someone's walking and somebody's really tired that they meet, and they phone ahead and buy them a pint. How nice is that? Can you imagine how lovely that was, that moment when the man arrived there? I love that one. And my 5-year-old granddaughter noticed my skin was very dry and carefully applied the moisturizer, which was sweet, and hugs for a sad person. They really are really lovely. And honestly, I don't get through looking at loads of these without a tear coming to my eye. So thank you to the brilliant kindness test team at Sussex for that. And in the book, what I do is I outline what I think, looking at the research, are the 7 keys to kindness. And I'm going to focus on just a couple of those. There are 2 big reasons why we should want a kinder world. The first is obvious, because kindness benefits the recipient, although far less research has been done on that, interestingly, than on how it benefits the giver. Maybe because it's obvious, but you know, it's interesting. And on one of the key things, as I said, that I wanted to understand is that kindness makes us feel good, and that is okay. And to measure this, of course, you can ask people how they feel just after they've done something kind for someone else, and they'll invariably tell you that they feel good. But of course, they've chosen to be kind at that moment. So if you want to demonstrate, well, does it make everybody feel good? If you tell them to be kind, do they still get that effect? There was an interesting study done a few years ago at the headquarters of Coca-Cola in Madrid, so the Spanish headquarters. And it was the setting for an experiment by psychologists from the University of California, Riverside. And they assigned people who worked there to either give or receive kind acts. And the givers were told, this is an experiment on happiness, and each week, for 4 weeks, they needed to plan and carry out 5 acts of kindness at work in one day for any of a list of 10 colleagues. So it could be making someone a drink, or sending them a nice email praising them, or just small things, or a thank you email, not big things. And the receivers didn't know what was going on. They knew they were in a study about the workplace, but they didn't really know that people were doing these kind acts for them. And they measured their job satisfaction and their life satisfaction at the beginning, and then they measured it again a month later. And by the end of the month, the job satisfaction and the life satisfaction had gone up in both groups. But a month after that, after they were not having to plan the acts anymore, this had worn off for the receivers of the kind acts, but it hadn't worn off for the givers. They still were more satisfied than they started with. And numerous other studies have shown us that giving makes us feel good. Experiments where you give people money at the start of the day, and then you either tell half the people to spend it on themselves, half of it to spend it on other people, or give it away. And those people feel better at the end of the day than the ones who spent it themselves. And you know, the German philosopher Nietzsche famously said, "He who cannot give anything away cannot feel anything either." So you could argue it's being generous that helps us to get in touch with our true selves. And there is evidence he was onto something. People who regularly give to charity each month have higher levels of well-being, irrespective of income. In the kindness test, we found that people who carry out more kind acts have higher levels of well-being on average. And it's not the case that just being kind is going to transform your life if everything is going wrong, but it can improve well-being a bit, and it's free, and it's not that hard to do. One study even found that recalling a past act of kindness can have the same impact as carrying out a new act. Now, I'm not saying don't do any new acts, because obviously you need to build up the memories to have those to look back on for the other acts, but it does show how this warm glow of kindness can be long-lasting. And there really is a warm glow. Reward centers in the brain that are activated when we're given chocolates, say, or money, are also activated when we give away money. And there are even some differences where some areas are, this is worked on at Sussex, some areas are activated in particular when you give it away, suggesting that in the way our brains reward us for being kind, which would make sense because kindness is part of cooperation, and cooperation is how humans have survived. And volunteering has been shown to have a long-term impact on people's well-being. There was an interesting study conducted when the Berlin Wall came down. So in East Germany, there was a very, very big tradition of volunteering. And it was very much, it partly showed the state you were a good citizen, and many people did it. And when the wall came down, only some people were still able to volunteer because many of the organizations that they were volunteering for went away, but others weren't. So in a way, it was a kind of real life experiment with what happens if people can't volunteer anymore and they used to. And they did find that those, the well-being fell in particular in those, when the wall came down, it fell in those who used to volunteer and weren't able to volunteer anymore. Now, there's even evidence that people who volunteer live longer. Now, this is tricky, of course, because if you're so unwell, say in old age, that you can't volunteer, then you think, well, that's just because the people are iller in the first place, they're more likely to die sooner. But even if you control for whether they're ill or not, then it still makes a difference. And in fact, a meta-analysis of all the studies showed that the risk of dying in the years following the studies was cut by a quarter if people volunteered, even once they took all these things into account. Kind acts have been shown to help people with social anxiety. And in one study, that works more effectively than, say, gradual exercises, getting people interacting in social situations. Partly because if you're doing the kind thing, it might feel less difficult to get involved in those social situations in the first place. So it could benefit you to be kind, but is that always the case? What about in cutthroat worlds like business or politics or sport? And across society, we're used to the fact that there is an emphasis on personal achievement, sometimes at the expense of others. And this brings me to another of the 7 keys to kindness, which is that you can be kind and be a winner. In the US, there's a psychometrician called Joe Folkman, and he studied the 360-degree feedback ratings of more than 50,000 leaders. So this is where staff give the feedback on what they think about their leader, and found the most likable bosses were also rated as the most effective and the most successful. His study was actually called "I'm the Boss, Why Should I Care If You Like Me?" And the answer is bosses should care, because he found it was so unusual to score low on likability and high on effectiveness, in that there was a 1 in 2,000 chance of that happening. So you can be a horrible boss and succeed, but there was a 1 in 2,000 chance of it, which is pretty low, really. And interestingly, sometimes within organizational psychology, this field is referred to as ethical leadership rather than kind leadership. And I wonder if that's feels like a more acceptable business-orientated word rather than saying kindness, which some feel feels too soft, and almost, I do wonder if the word kindness almost has a bit of a kind of image problem about it. But research shows that when leaders are ethical, in this ethical leadership research, there's a more positive and collaborative atmosphere at work, employees perform better. And the big advantage is you don't have to be an ethical leader, you haven't got to be, say, charismatic. It's much easier to teach somebody to be an ethical leader than a charismatic leader. But you do need to be kind, of course, and it's not necessarily simple. If one person at work is slacking and everyone else is picking up the slack, is it kind to just leave them to that, or should you intervene because it's not very kind on the others to leave the others out of it, even though that can be a difficult conversation you may have to have. And it's not just at work. You may think, oh, well, there's no place for kindness in something like elite sport. But this is a guy called Diego Mentrida, who's a Spanish triathlete. And here he is in the 2020 triathlon in Spain. He was coming in fourth after a guy called James Teagle. But then Teagle takes a wrong turn, and Mentrida gets ahead, and the black gets ahead, and he looks around and he sees him there. He can't work out what's happened, but it's that the guy behind had taken the wrong route. So he slows right down, lets him pass, which means that Teagle gets the bronze medal, and he doesn't get a medal at all because he now comes fourth. And so there they are shaking hands. Now you could say, oh, well, he lost the race. He wasn't the winner. He came fourth. What was the point of that? But because of his actions, he was then awarded honorary third prize as well, and the same prize money as James Teagle. And of course, he has been praised for that by people all around the world and remembered ever since for it. So I'd ask who was the winner in that situation. I think he was the winner by doing the kind thing. You might remember the Brownlee brothers as well, where, Alistair Brownlee famously gave up his third place to prop up his brother and get him over the line into second. And again, you have to wonder was the real winner Alistair Brownlee, because he's the one who gets remembered for being so kind. So in the workplace and in sport, maybe kindness can work, but in politics, surely not. Now, this is Lady Mary Wortley Montagu. She died in 1762. And I'd like to be better known because she was the source of this saying, civility costs nothing and buys everything, known as the Montagu principle. And she's saying behaving badly doesn't lead to success in politics. Now, you may, of course, be bringing to mind your own examples of people behaving badly in politics who are sometimes successful, for a while anyway. And interestingly, President Trump, who I don't know if you thought of then, he has called for more civility in politics. And there is some really interesting research from the academic Jeremy Frimer, who analysed Trump's tweets for some time. And he found that actually people who were Trump supporters disapproved of him more when he was rude. And when he was polite, they liked him better. So in fact, very few of his supporters actively liked him being horrible. They liked him despite it rather than because of it. They may have liked his policies, but they didn't actually like it when he was rude. And we wait to see what happens to him. Obviously, so far, he hasn't lasted. So there he is. He contrasts a bit with Jacinda Ardern, who has, of course, just stopped being Prime Minister of New Zealand, whom she has actively talked about kindness and said that of all the qualities that brought her to become Prime Minister, she thinks the most important is kindness. Now, it's interesting because I've just been in New Zealand and people who don't like her don't like the fact at all that she said she was kind, and would say, well, what's kind about going to food banks, or what's kind about whatever it is that they're not happy with at that moment. So it could be a kind of hostage to fortune for political leaders to talk about kindness too much, but they can succeed by doing it. So you can be kind and win, and there are reasons to do more of it, even if it's partly to benefit yourself. And I don't believe that means it's selfish. My third key to kindness, if you like, is not to get too hung up on motives, because what we want is more of it. Yes, you might feel good about helping someone. Yes, maybe you might look good about helping someone if people know. But if what you're doing is still truly aimed at benefiting someone else, which, as I said at the start, is one of the ways of defining kindness, then I think that's okay. So in summary, we are kinder than we think. We could be kinder still. I have a kind of prescription for kindness and how to be kinder. And I'm not saying I'm an especially kind person, but writing this book has changed the way I think about it and changed some of the things I try to do. But in this book, I look in detail at things like empathy and how to look at things from other people's perspective. And there are 20 tips in my prescription for kindness. A few of them are things like really listening to people when they talk to you, pausing before you post something on social media. Do you need to tell somebody that something wasn't very good, or you could just keep quiet about it? Not fearing embarrassment when you're trying to be kind to people, which was something I did do before. I try really hard not to. not to be embarrassed about offering some kindness to a stranger. You know, that even if they say they don't want it, then I don't know them. I'm not going to see them again. And I was a hesitant helper, I think, and I'm trying to get over that. And also being kind to yourself. There's a whole, I've done a whole chapter on this because, of course, that's very important too. Because we all stand to benefit from more kindness. It's win-win-win in a way. It helps others, it benefits you, and it's contagious, so it passes on to others. In the Coca-Cola study, the recipients of the kind acts started carrying out more kind acts themselves. So I've only talked about a couple of the keys to kindness, and I will leave that there for now. But if there's one tip I would urge you all to do, it's to start noticing kindness, to become a kindness twitcher, to look for it everywhere you go. And you cannot stop. I kept a kindness diary while I was writing the book, looking out for kindness. And once you start looking for it, you can't stop. So on the train today, the guard was really helping the woman who didn't know whether to change at Polegate or Lewis and which to do. And then other people started joining in, trying to work out which to do, because we had to do it before the door shut. So everyone was trying to look it up on their phones to get the answer, but in case she had to get off at Lewis, which she did. It was quite exciting. But and she did, she made it. It's very good. Let's hope that was the right advice, because that is where she got off. But anyway, I hope it was. But you see it all the time. I cannot stop seeing it all the time now. So start looking out for it, and you will find kindness all around us. Now, what we're going to do next is to have a panel discussion about some of the really interesting research that is going on here. Just while we get that set up, I thought it would be really nice to know what is the last kind act that somebody's done for you. And I was wondering if you would just like to tell you, if you're in the room, to tell your neighbour about that while they're here. And if you're those people who are not in the room, then Gillian will tell you how to do it on Padlet, and then we will see what you put up on our screen.
I gotta have a Padlet, right?
I'm afraid you don't get to do that, because you have to come and be sitting here. You can sit there, that would be great. I'm afraid you're not allowed to discuss because you need to come and be in our panel. Sorry about that.
Volunteers to meet whenever I know. Not really that too bad.
Sarah, pass around. On the board here, you can see the ones for people at home. All sorts of nice things. There's all sorts of lovely things here. See, everyone likes talking about kindness too much. Yes, yes, yes. We're going to come back together now. Everyone likes talking about kindness too much, you see. So there's all these lovely ones here from back home, from people at home. All sorts of nice things. Someone formatted my document when I was rushed. That's nice. A friend listened when I've had a hard day. All sorts of lovely ones. Chocolate. Tea. Yeah. Vet looking after me and my dog. All sorts of things. There's lots of chocolates, there's lots of biscuits and tea. It's always a theme, the tea.
There's an ongoing one. My daughter is making tea.
Oh,
happening now.
It's in action.
Right now.
That's good. That's good. Is there anyone here where somebody told them a particularly nice one that they thought was really nice for somebody being kind to them that you might like to share with us?
I think
You couldn't find the way here. And somebody saved you.
Oh.
Oh. They weren't trying to come here at all, but yeah, something different. Someone else have one over here.
yeah, my neighbour brought one up, which I think everyone will experience, which is when you're in your car and it's frustrating and horrible, and there's a queue, and somebody lets you in.
Somebody
Oh,
lets
yes.
somebody in the queue of traffic. Yeah, that's
We were
great.
talking about that. There is another side to road rage, right? Because we often talk about driving and road rage, but there's so much, it's like what you were saying, what you notice, what's salient, but there's so much kindness all the time on the roads as well.
Good if you let someone go as well, then you feel safe.
Ah.
So what we're going to do now is, with my lovely panel here, we're going to have a flavour of some of the research on kindness that is going on at Sussex. So let me introduce them. We have Dr. Martin Spinelli, who has the superb title, Professor of Podcasting, and you said you were the first. That is a very modern title. I like it. Who's going to talk about kindness in schools. We have Nikki McCrudden, a PhD student at the University of Sussex's Business School, who's going to talk about kindness and compassion in the workplace. And Dr. Liz McDonald, who's a senior lecturer in sociology, who's going to talk about generosity in the community. And we also have Professor Robin Banerjee, who we all keep mentioning because we can't help it, who is as you know, the founder of this centre. And he's going to be sharing some more of the findings from the kindness tests that complement really nicely the panelists' work. And we're going to start with children by looking at kindness in schools with Martin. Now, Martin, you have created a podcast, and I was listening to some of this earlier, called The Res, that teaches kids about kindness and well-being, and it's kind of drama serial, isn't it? It's a drama. But where did this idea all come from to do a podcast on it?
So this came about in 2018 when my research partner Lance Dan and I had just finished our big book on podcasting as a new kind of audio media. And at that moment in time, we both had teenage children, and both of them were going through some challenging times in school socially with OCD and also having some social media issues. We started exploring, thinking about what we were going to do next, what our next one was going to, next project was going to be. We had made a lot of contributions to the field of radio and podcasting, both aesthetically and theoretically over the years. We decided we wanted to do something that had a really obvious and clear positive social impact. So we started looking around. We noticed rates of adolescent mental health issues spiking across the board. In 2017, the government had put out a green paper on adolescent mental health and well-being. The recommendations they had were for no new funding, but to just sort of, in my words, rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. And we thought, well, rather than moan about this and rather than wring our hands, let's put our skills in media making and our networks in media making to some good use and to try to have some impact, to make a tiny dent in the adolescent mental health crisis through a podcast that was part of a bigger transmedia project, which included a comic book and a website. So that's the comic book, which you can go on our website and get for free. So off the back of getting that idea, we began to cast around in our respective universities to find people who might be able to support us with this. I found Robin, I found the Press Lab, found all the great research they were doing there, particularly research into children's media diets, how those diets were affecting their values, and how those values were affecting their long-term mental health and well-being. So I had a couple of meetings with Robin, took some notes about the latest research that he and his team were doing, and read lots and lots of the articles that he pointed me to. I took those notes into the writers' rooms. We had writers from the BBC, from ITV, the Children's Comic Laureate, lots of really, really great people working on this with us. And I gave our writers and worked with our writers to integrate those notes on kindness, well-being, media diets, into a script for what was then in season 1, a 10-episode sci-fi adventure drama for 7 to 11-year-olds.
And I like the idea that you were trying to incorporate research, but but make it fun as well.
Yes.
You were doing both of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So fun, the messages, and off the back of the first tranche of research that we did with our listeners, we found that the messages in the podcast were really quite subtle and buried and hidden. There's an undercurrent of them, but first and foremost, the kids were responding to the silliness, to the fun, to the references to a lot of the video games they were playing at the time, like Minecraft and Fortnite. And we made it something that was going to be first and foremost fun, that people, parents and kids would listen to for fun, and had built in some very, very subtle pro-social kindness and well-being messages.
And can you give us a bit of a demo?
I
You've got
would
some, haven't you?
love to.
So I had to go this morning, I must say, playing the games, and it shows how long it is since I played the games, because there's no instructions because they assume you know, which kids do, don't they? I couldn't. But,
So this is
I
our
love these.
Yeah, so this is our landing page on the website, join the res with a z.com. It looks like a phone because the trope in the story is the heroes in the drama find this ancient phone. They're in the future, find this ancient phone, and it has been hacked to allow them to communicate with the kids in the past, the real kids of the 2020s. And in this future world, everything is perfect. It's a consumerist utopia. They can download anything they want, change their bodies in any way they want instantly, but no one is really happy. No one can really communicate. There aren't really substantial, solid relationships. So the heroes use the phone to talk to the real kids in the past for advice on kindness and what makes a real friend and how to deflect bullying and lots of things like that. So these are some of the games. So here's one in one of the episodes.
I know, that's the one I went straight for this morning.
A giant Minecraft-like fart cow corners one of the heroes in a cave, and she has to use a defunct droid to blast it out of the sky.
Oh, you're good at it.
And we don't have any fart sounds. That's really important. There we go. Okay, so you get the idea. So that's one of them. There is another one. This is a really easy one. So this is just like a quiz that rips off of some of the themes, and the themes are all about kindness. So there are a lot of droids that are kind of in various states of evolution and empathy. Yo, droid man, you seem lonely. Can I be your hairbrush, tumbleweed, auntie, omni burger, or friend? Let's try friend. Yay. Okay. If you've got a problem, it's usually good to grumble, complain, whine, clang, or talk. Let's try talk. Okay, so these games reiterate a lot of the messages in the story. For the second season, we integrated something very similar to what you were talking about earlier, Claudia, with your kindness diary. So this is the EKT, the electronic kindness pulse. And of course, in the future, the base unit measure of kindness is a Banerjee.
I had nothing to do with this.
So the kids log their kindness and they charge up the EKP, which the heroes in the story use to zap empathy into the malicious AI that's trying to run the place. and control their lives. So let's go down here. We're going to log some kindness in the edu terminal. So you go to one of these sections, and these are some things that you can do. I'm going to help a teacher, cheer somebody up who's down, pick a shy kid for your team, stand up for somebody who needs it, or own your hearts, which is very popular. So we're going to pick a shy kid, and you get a little blurb about which kind of reinforces again some of the messaging in the series. So getting left out feels bad. Not everyone who puts their hand up includes someone who isn't outgoing in your next team. So we're going to log our kindness, and awesome, we get a 5 points for that. And we're going to charge up. And then when we go back to the EKP, you will see we have more Banerjees now. And the EKP is almost ready to zap the evil AI. The last thing I want to show you is just a little message. So I was talking about the messages from the kids from the past, our time, to the kids in the future. So a lot of them have been collected here, and messages pop up at the top, banners pop up at the top to let you know new messages are here. So here, Sav is asking, Sav is one of the main characters, help us pass things. What is this thing called kindness? So let's hear what Farah had to say about that.
Being kind is saying hello to someone who you may not always speak to, or playing with someone who's alone, or just always saying and smiling to someone. Because my mum always says smiling is contagious. So that happens. But smiling is nice, and that's a kind gesture.
So yeah, so that's a quick sample of the res, but go on to jointheres.com and explore. There are a lot of teachers' resources as well there.
And how has it been received? I'm really interested to know what the kids think. I'm sure they like all the fart bits and things, but I'm interested to know, what do they think? Do they think they're being kind of, you know, oh, it's just all about kindness, you know, we all know this, or do they get really involved?
No, they really like it. We have a survey online on the website for kids, which measures how their understanding of kindness has been affected, measures how their behavior has been affected, their self-reported behavior has been affected around certain topics. And Claudia and Jillian was very kind enough to use her Jedi XL skills, and in about 30 seconds, whip up a little chart for us that parsed all this. But here's just some quick stats on it. We have 500,000 downloads so far, which is really significant in the world of podcasting. We cracked the top 20 charts in both the US and the UK. Our distributor, Gen Z Media, is the biggest distributor of kids audio content in the world. They're part of Wondery. We've delivered 3,000 comics. We are the first podcast to be approved for PSHE accreditation, PSHE Association accreditation in the UK. I have to do a huge shout out here to Daisy Cresswell and Jane Keating from Make Your Trouble, who were the ones who spearheaded our successful PSHE Association accreditation bid, which took a long time. And they really pulled the stops out and made it happen. So yeah, we're in over 100 schools. We're getting a lot of positive feedback. And the kids really love it. We get lots of funny comments. On the next slide, Jillian, really quickly, there are just a bunch of comments that I pulled from, you know, wow. These are kids leaving comments on the podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I just grabbed a few of them earlier, and yeah.
And they say we need more. Are they going to get more?
Hopefully we'll get more. So I've got two grant bids out, looking for money to do season 3 and to expand the digital offering, particularly to develop a bespoke app which will pop kids out of the online listening experience into the real world with real conversations and real activities that support healthy media diet and mental well-being. So if anybody has 150 grand in their pocket and wants to send it to me, we'll do season 3 right now.
Okay, cool. Just hand that over afterwards if you could. That'd be great. Thank you very much for that. And Robin, what did you think when you first saw the measure was a Banerjee?
Oh my goodness, I'm immortalized now, right? On a podcast platform, website, comic book. is absolutely amazing. And I really think this is something about connecting people to the topic of kindness and saying, actually, this is something we can engage with. Because you're right, I had the same worry when I first started doing this work in schools. I had the same worry that, oh, teenagers, especially because I was working, first of all, in secondary schools with this. And I thought maybe they're not going to take it seriously. It'll just feel like it's too soft and fluffy and they won't really engage with it. And what I found instead was that actually it really spoke to them. There was something very intuitive about it. They really had a feeling of what it means to experience kindness. And absolutely, they had a feeling of what it means to experience unkindness as well. And they could really identify with it. I found actually, interestingly, it gave me more of a route into mental health than what I'd been doing previously, which was talking about mental health directly with the young people. This was something that was much more like real in their relationships right now. And it was really interesting to start thinking, actually, there's something very different that you get when you focus on the context as a whole and thinking about where kindness is, as opposed to just picking out the problems when things have gone wrong, right? So where it's going right, what's happening, how do we grow that?
And so do you know from research what works best in schools?
Well, it comes, it comes back to what you said right at the beginning. Or if actually it was your last point in your talk, noticing, paying attention to it, shining a light on it. Now, actually, we found in the kindness test, people did feel that kindness was very valued in the school context. Educational context was one of the places where people felt like kindness was valued. And we need to capitalize on that. It means something to young people. Actually, the reality is, of course, that it means something to all of us when we experience kindness. And we got that in spades from people who completed the kindness test. I got a lot of lovely letters and emails from people who said that actually doing the kindness test itself made them much more aware of kindness all around them. So yes, I think noticing it is really important, a big first step.
And we did ask people in the kindness test where the places where they most noticed kindness were.
Yes.
Schools didn't
Schools
come very high.
So, I mean, you know, so home, where you would hope that would be, right? Home was important. Workplace was also really important. I think that's really interesting to remind ourselves that actually the workplace is a place where people do talk about kindness being extremely important and being valued as well. It's not to say that it's easy in every workplace, not to say that is always there in every workplace, but when people are noticing it, it really does something. School, I think there might have been a demographic issue because, of course, 18 to 99, you know, so they were talking about where they are most seeing it. So I think that would have been a factor. And I think we do need to remember that actually people who said they worked in a school context actually talked a lot about how important kindness was. Again, not that it was easy necessarily, but how important it was. And I think actually your reminders, your tips in the prescription, I think does give us a route into growing it, because actually so much of it can be done in an easy way. So much of it can be done in a way that feels very intuitive to us if we just give ourselves the opportunity to notice it and celebrate it.
And we're going to look at the workplace next. And you did find that a lot of people did agree that kindness was really valued in their place of work.
Yeah, I mean, the
74%.
Absolutely, which is really, I wasn't sure what we were going to find when we asked people about what kindness was like at their work, right? Is it something that was valued? And actually people said it was. The vast majority, right? Vast majority did. Now, there were variations between different fields of work. That is true. Like I said, education was high. Medical, healthcare was a big one, of course. I guess that probably won't surprise you. Healthcare was big. Education was big. Social work, also hospitality industry as well. Now, this is not like a black and white situation. It's not saying that there isn't then unkindness as well. And it's also not saying that kindness is there all the time everywhere, but it's saying that it meant something and it really counted for something in those contexts. Some settings, they were less confident. It was still positive, still above the midpoint on the scale, but they were less confident that it really counted in their workplace. Finance and insurance services, the utilities, mining, energy supplies, they were struggling a little bit in terms of feeling confident that it would be counted, that it really is valued. And so one of the things I'm always asking is actually, of course, you might say, well, the kind of people-facing occupations like education or healthcare and so on, of course, it's natural that it would feel like it counts there. But in a way, every field of work is people-facing because you're there with other people and you're working together. So one of the things I really want to try and bring out is what you're talking about in terms of the, you know, kind leadership, ethical leadership, and so on, is to say that this is relevant everywhere. And of course, it matters everywhere. It should count everywhere. And I think it needs us to shine a light on it. And that's what really we're trying to do with this research centre.
Well, we're going to look next at kindness in the workplace because we have Nikki McCrudden, who's a PhD student in University of Sussex's business school. Now, interestingly, your background is in the public sector, isn't it? I mean, you've worked in all sorts of places.
Yeah, I mean, my early career was very much public sector. I started out in local authority leisure. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I jumped around about 13 different jobs. Is it not working?
I think I can hear it through the mic.
Yeah, I jumped around about 13 different jobs in 10 years, and I went from local authority leisure to the probation service to the NHS, where I had a variety of different jobs, and then I moved into running my own management training company, but we specialised in working with the public sector. I've got a real affinity for the public sector. There's just something about it that feels like home to me. So being able to deliver training to firefighters, councils.
And what got you interested in kindness and compassion in the workplace in particular?
Yeah, it was probably the last few years of running the training company that you would, as a trainer, you would go out and I would marvel at the work that was being done by the public sector workforce. And then, you know, I would find a lot of the people on training courses would come to talk to me about experiences they'd had when they were struggling at work and other people hadn't noticed it. And yet we were being brought in to help people connect with their colleagues. And I've always been really passionate that learning and development has to make a difference. And it got me thinking, well, if what we're doing isn't making enough of a difference, why is that? Why is it that you've got all these wonderful people who care so passionately about their communities, but they're not noticing each other struggling? Now, to quantify that, I think, generally speaking, most workplaces are brilliant when the big stuff happens. When a colleague loses a loved one, or if they're seriously ill, there's a big rallying sense. But it's the everyday stuff, but you kind of think of as death by 1,000 cuts.
And is that because it's quite hard? Is kindness in the workplace hard?
I don't think it's kindness is hard necessarily. I was reflecting on my own experience of running the business. And I remember very vividly a period of time we'd just taken on a new office manager. So I now had the pressure of another salary. And I was feeling that pressure. I was getting into work before everyone else. I was shutting my office door. I was head down, looking for tenders, working really hard. And I withdrew from my colleagues, which was not my natural style. And what happened was, in the absence of me communicating, my colleagues, because human beings hate uncertainty, they made up their own reason about why I'd withdrawn. And their assumption was that they'd done something wrong and I was angry with them.
Wow.
And I think part of the reason why maybe that compassion doesn't get delivered is because people like me think we shouldn't be sharing that. I was thinking, I'm the boss. I shouldn't be putting my worries on other people. My job is to take theirs, surely. So I kept quiet.
So do you think it is okay then for bosses to share their worries and their uncertainty, or is that then piling it on the people below them?
I think if done in the right way and in the right context, I actually think it sets a tone that it's okay to struggle with something. And what I learned from that difficult experience when I realized my colleagues thought I was mad at them was after that, about a year ago, I did tell one of my colleagues when I was struggling, and do you know what she did? She cleared my diary. She said, that's it, you're not having any more meetings, you're having a week off. And she told me I was having a week off. Nice. So I think it gives people permission to put their hand up and say, I'm not okay at the moment.
So what are you going to be studying in your PhD here? I know it's nearish the beginning.
Oh,
so.
it's very early days. I'm very lucky to have Gillian as a supervisor. It's one of my supervisors. So my passion is very much this everyday suffering. And I want to understand where where the process isn't working. Is it that people aren't noticing the suffering? Is it that we're noticing it, but we're so busy we can't actually experience an emotion?
Yeah.
Or is it that we notice it, we experience emotion, but something else is stopping us actually helping? Once I'm clear about where the biggest barrier is, then I'll know where to focus the rest of the PhD, because ultimately what I'd love to be able to do in 3 or 4 years' time is go back to the public sector and say, this is where to invest your money. Your tight budgets, if you want to make a difference to your workforce, and we know that kindness and compassion, it improves retention, it improves engagement, it reduces staff sickness, but you've got to invest your money in the right place, and hopefully the PhD will provide an evidence base for that.
Because don't you think in a way that presumably most leaders, unless they're really horrible, most leaders want to be kind leaders, don't they? You can imagine most people setting out to be that. And then why does that not work? Is it just, it's hard, there are always pressures that are put upon them?
Yeah, I used to do dealing with difficult behaviour training. There was a wonderful quote that said, most people don't come to work thinking, if I work really hard today, by the end of the day, everyone will hate me. It's not people's intention to go to work and alienate people. I think sometimes one of the problems at work is that the people you work with, they're not your family, they're not your friends, they might not be people you choose to socialise with outside of work. And so it's tricky sometimes to build a professional relationship that doesn't blur boundaries, and what if you need to tell them off later? And I think sometimes people worry about how do you create that relationship? I don't think it's necessarily a desire not to be kind or compassionate. I think it's a discomfort in knowing where the boundaries are at work.
Yeah, I've seen cases where people stop going to the pub once they become the boss because they slightly think they'll spoil it for everybody.
Yeah, or then they think, well, what happens if I then have to talk to someone about their performance and I'm too friendly with them? It's a very difficult line to walk, I think.
So what would you say, I know you haven't done your research yet, what would you say individuals could do now to help create kinder workplaces at whatever level they might be at?
So I think basing it on my own anecdotal experience at this point, it would be firstly, that example I gave of my own withdrawing from my team is that actually if you feel like you're suffering, I think your prescription was, or the comments you made was, I provided help when people asked. So I think if you are struggling, ask for help. Be brave, set the tone that it's okay to ask. And the flip side of that is if you see someone's behaviour change, maybe try and put a compassionate interpretation, not that they hate you, but they're struggling with something, and just ask. I think at that point when I was struggling, had my colleagues knocked on the door and just smiled and said, do you want a cup of tea? That would have made a huge difference.
And I noticed one thing that you said, that you had started to deliberately practice regular positive feedback at work, and people are a bit confused. Tell us about that.
That was very much similar to your Coca-Cola example. I read in a psychology magazine about giving 3 pieces of well-crafted positive feedback every day. And I thought this could be a fun challenge. So I picked on the poor lady who sat next to me at first, and she was so I started giving her feedback, and she looked at me really baffled, which just kind of made it more fun for me that she was now confused. And I realised at first she kind of looked confused, and I think she was thinking I wanted something because I flattered her. And then after a while, by the end of the week, she started saying thank you, and I realised I was going home happier. Because I was looking for the positive.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting there. Well, thank you very much for that. So, Robin, we talked about schools and we talked about workplaces, and next we're going to talk about kindness in the community. What did you find in the kindness test, and when it comes to the community generally and what people thought about?
Well, I mean, the fascinating thing was, like you were saying, people talked about kindness being everywhere. They talked about having experienced kindness a lot recently. Many people said in the last hour when they completed the survey. That is very interesting to see that once you ask people and you prompt them, actually, they do talk about, actually, now that I think about it, yeah, just 20 minutes ago, something happened. And you could see the way the Padlet filled up and the buzz around the room. It's there all around us. Now, there is a very interesting kind of what do you call it, like a time or a chronological or historical context to this, because as you said, most people didn't feel that kindness had increased during their lifetime. They generally felt it either stayed the same, and actually there was a bit of pessimism as well. A lot of people had said that it declined in their lifetime. Only about maybe 15, 16%, something like that, said that they felt that it increased. But then the big disruptor, COVID, people really had a very different response with regard to COVID, and it was the majority. Now, I will say, this wasn't the case across every country.
Yeah.
In the UK context, it was actually high. It's like 60s, maybe 67, maybe even slightly higher than that. 67 or 70% approximately said that they felt the COVID-19 pandemic overall had made people kinder, a little bit or quite a lot more kind. And I'm really intrigued by that. Like, what was it that was generating that? And we all know huge amount of polarization, different perspectives, worry, anxiety, and certainly there was plenty of negativity in the last 3 years. We've all been around it, we've all seen the news items, but there was an awful lot of kindness as well. And one of the things that I get asked a lot when I talk about this, people say, well, what's going to happen? Right? What's going to happen? Are we going to maintain that kindness, or are we going to slide back into a sort of sense of isolation? Right, not connecting with other people, only thinking about ourselves, only thinking about what's going to be in it for me. And I always say the same thing. Well, that's up to us. Right? I don't know the answer. That's up to us. That's what we do as a community. If we want to hold on to it, that's down to us. No one's going to do it for us. Just like you can't have someone standing up and saying, right, everybody, you lot be kind now. It's up to us to do that. So I feel that's the challenge, and we got it from the kindness test. It is all around us. It's up to us to notice it. It's up to us to celebrate it. It's up to us to shine a light on it and talk about it and grow it.
Well, Liz, you know all about this. So Dr. Liz McDonnell is a senior lecturer in sociology, and you study, if you like, generosity in the community. How did you come to study generosity in the first place?
I think I've worked on this project with two other people, Amy Clark and Alison Phipps. I think what we noticed the surge. It was interesting. We also noticed the not surge. We knew that some people were hoarding and emptying as there were toilet paper. Other people were kind of setting up kind of mutual aid groups or checking on neighbours. And that became quite interesting. This kind of the intensity of it drew us to it, but also, I guess, kind of questions about why some people and not others. Yeah. So, and I think it came from me personally as an interest in kind of other focused behaviours. And I just want to pick up on the noticing thing that Gillian and I were talking about recently. I think we have to notice kindness, but I think kindness and generosity involves noticing. And that's the link with other focusedness, which is kind of my not theoretical brain, that's my kind of sociological brain of thinking about it. It is, you end up having to be open.
Can I just check you? Sorry, can I just check you can hear at the back?
Sorry,
can you hear Liz's mic when she's talking to you?
Can you-
I'm just checking that you
Not really.
can.
Sorry,
I wonder if it's not
Is it muted, maybe?
not on, or maybe got accidentally muted sometimes.
It's on the top.
Oh, yes, it's muted.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's just if it gets it just, that will be better.
Ah, there we go.
Is that better? Oh my goodness.
yeah. Things we don't want to miss those things. And so tell us what you've looked at so far in general.
Well, we've done two things. I did 9 interviews with people about their giving and generosity kind of practices during COVID. And we also did a content analysis of and some case studies of kind of what we called these mobilities of giving, these big picture givings like Captain Tom. We did a local one in Brighton as well, and Marcus Rashford. So we kind of looked at, from quite a distant perspective, these kind of contagions of giving, these fast-moving waves of giving. And we also looked at something really micro, which is the bit I did, which was looking at getting people to talk about what they did and why. Yeah.
And it's interesting that you're using the words giving and generosity, and that you're not using the word kindness in particular. Do you think of it as kindness? Is there a difference?
I think, if I'm really honest, kindness is not a word. It's a bit like what you were saying. It's a bit like kind of feminism, which of course I am one, but the word is somehow kind of been a bit messed with, hasn't it? And so I wanted to look, as you, and I agree with you really strongly, that we were not interested in people's virtuousness. I'm not interested in the virtuous side of giving or generosity. I'm interested in the action of it and what it's, and I totally agree too. And there's lots of evidence for the feel good back. And that doesn't matter at all. As long as you're intending some benefit, if you're getting a huge amount of benefit back, that doesn't bother me. What's important is that something was done that was kind of pro-social or other focused. Yeah.
And what sort of things did people say to you about why they did the kind acts and whether they considered themselves generous?
Yeah. People didn't really want to talk too much about generosity because I think that does have that slight tendency to get into, I mean, I used it as a portal to understand giving, but people were a bit embarrassed about it because it's obviously got a little bit of a virtuous, the purity of the act. So people were much more likely to want to talk about giving rather than being generous. And I understood that, even though I kept using it just to kind of open up the conversation. And so what was the question again? Why they did it?
Sort of things people said.
What people said, yeah. I mean, this was what was probably the most interesting thing about our study. And it's no surprise as a sociologist that I kind of tuned in here, was that people were mobilized often by empathy. So they talked about noticing and feeling something. However, they also gave and were generous in quite a way, in a dutiful way. So as part of the contract, you don't walk away from that situation. It's what you should do. So it wasn't coming from what I would call a kind of glowing kind of...
Does that make it less pleasurable, do you think, in a way? It's just kind of your duty, you must do this.
It may make it less pleasurable if you're not getting the kind of feedback, but I'm not sure they weren't getting the feedback.
Still got feedback.
Yeah, they probably still got some feedback. But what I think was kind of important is this kind of logic of, you know, what I call kind of the justness of giving. You give because you have more. And I don't mean that in a noblesse oblige, whatever that expression is, way, in a charitable way from it. People could see very unequal resource distributions in society and said, that is, the inequality was very, very clear to them. Therefore, I must do something and I share my resources because other people have less than me. And also, this leads me to my next point, which is people were very critical about the context in which they gave and the macro context, i.e. governments and what they saw as their kind of very deep ungenerosity of the state. And I think that's probably the most important finding in a way. And I think it does connect some of the stuff we've talked about here today, is that whilst I believe it is up to us to kind of engage in other focusedness of one kind or another, whether it's from the people who are doing things like literally listening, paying attention to practical tasks, volunteering, everything. People are doing so many, often multiple things, which I found quite interesting. It wasn't just a one show kind of giver. And these were givers who gave before the pandemic. That's interesting too. So the pandemic didn't go, oh, it wasn't an epiphany moment. It was, this was part of who they were. But what I would want, what we're arguing, I think, in this paper partly is this idea of dyssynergy. Now, it actually really matters if your university, i.e. Sussex, tells you to be kind at the interpersonal level. Kindness needs to be congruent through the whole system. So whilst I think it is up to us to do, we've got a choice about whether we notice and whether we act on that. We are working in a context where kindness and generosity and giving was not being modelled by our government during that time. And that was really noticed by people, and it made it much harder in a sense. And this is what I worry about, is that without that modelling, with unequal distribution of resources, people, if we want to encourage kindness, we have to kind of encourage more equitable resource systems.
Could you encourage people by encouraging this idea of duty? If this was an idea that came through strongly, could that be deliberately encouraged to suggest it's not everyone's duty, because everyone can't do stuff, but
if you can,
society's duty if you can.
If you can, I kind of like that idea of if you can, yes. But I also think that, you know, this notion of congruence is really important, but also within any system, it's really hard being kind in a family when you're the only one doing it. You get to a point where you think, I just can't be doing this anymore. But I also wanted to kind of flag the idea of kind of whichever size system you're in, it needs to be congruent. Otherwise, there are these potential dyssynergies. Yeah, just like at school, sometimes the kids back and say, oh my God, my teacher was going on about this today and she'd just done this. That's a perfect example. People are always looking upwards, looking upstream. And if people are talking rubbish up there, you're it can make you feel quite stupid.
So I just thought that's quite interesting in relation to your work in schools, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
you can do the classes where everyone talks about kindness, but is the school feeling like a kind
Well,
place to live?
exactly. And I always say that point about alignment and synergy and concordance really, I think is really important. But the important thing is also to recognize that we can organize, we can come together as a collective, and we don't need to throw our hands up and say, well, the system doesn't let us. Actually, we need to empower ourselves collectively to be able to change that. And that's actually what's happening up and down the country in terms of schools. And I guess, I mean, I don't work in the kind of political sphere, but I guess that's what we need to scale up on a societal level. But in schools, it's really about hearing the voice of all the different stakeholders, whether it's the pupils or the staff members or the parents, the carers, community connections, to participate, come together and make a difference. And kindness, the thing that comes through again and again, we found this in the kindness test actually, when we asked people about doing a kind act, what the kind of response to that was that they experienced. And you're right, the feeling good part was there. Biggest one though was feeling more connected. That word I think is really important. How we connect with each other through kindness then brings us together to be able to tackle some of those big systemic issues. It's not easy. It's not going to happen overnight. But I see, I mean, you said earlier on, Gillian, the research centre here has been very much supported by generous Pears Foundation funding. The Pears Foundation has been it's been really interesting for me to actually see the grantees of the Pears Foundation, actually, this has been like I mean, we've seen it, haven't we, Julian? It's been like a common bond because there is this sense of bringing people together. And we found it originally when we set up the Kindness Network at Sussex, that was with the work of David Jamley and Kindness UK, right? Their support was fundamental because they could see a way of bringing people together through kindness. And I think that's what we're able to do to build the synergy. The synergy doesn't just happen to us, we build that synergy.
Well, we've got some time now for your questions. So if you're in the room, do wait and the roving mic will come towards you. If you are not in the room, then do put questions into the chat and Gillian will have a look. And is James Croft here?
Yes.
He is? Where is he? I can't see.
Oh,
there he is. So, hello. So while people are thinking of their questions, I just wanted to call on James a moment. He's the university's new chaplain and lead faith advisor and the first humanist to be appointed to lead a chaplaincy team at a UK university, which is interesting. And I was wondering whether, James, either you have a question or a short comment you would like to make, and do wait for the mic, please, so people at home can hear.
Okay, I trust it's not. I don't have a comment, I just have a question. The thing that I love so much about the work of the centre is that you're doing academic research and then following it through into workplaces, schools, communities like at this university in a practical way. I love hearing about some of the work you've done on this campus to proactively try and make this community more kind. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you've done in that regard and your thoughts about what we might do in the future to make this university a more kind place.
Oh, that's interesting. I think this is an interesting one because I think any of you could answer what you think might make this a kinder place. Let's start here.
Wow, what would make it a kinder place? This is going to turn into a therapy session very quickly. And I would, if I could wave a magic wand, I would have the pressure and the stress and the anxiety and the speed with which everything has to happen just come down a few notches. I don't have that magic wand and I don't have access to the people somewhere in Sussex House who could make it happen, but that would be my wish.
That's interesting.
Time is a big one, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Nikki, what would you say?
Having only been in the university a few months, I
Yeah.
have been struck by the amount of kindness that happens.
It's good to hear.
I even to the point that the business school offers, in response to the cost of living crisis, if you're on the campus early, they'll offer free breakfast to students to help with things like that. So I've been struck by the amount of kindness that already exists. I think the one thing that really struck me as a new PhD student was I had so many people telling me how a PhD would be a very lonely journey and how it would be very, very difficult. And I almost started to feel like I was weird because I wasn't feeling that until I met one of the library, the doctoral school in the library, and he said to me, "No, I had a wonderful time when I did my PhD." And I think it would be to sing the positives as loud as you sing the supporting words of caution.
That's nice. Yes.
I like the slowing down thing. I think we'd all be a lot kinder and more giving if we were less stressed. So taking away the stress. But I guess what I would say is that I think we would promote kindness through connecting up together the kind of management of the university and the policies and the decisions to be more thoughtful about how that actually impacts people. So from a teaching perspective, it would be kind of reducing staff-student ratios. So I'd want to kind of look at that interaction and try and put the kindness into the kind of policies which kind of
kindness in policy. Yeah,
I do. Yeah, and I think that allows people to.
Robin.
Well, you know what, I find myself really struggling sometimes with the balancing act. How do you balance the different demands in order to arrive at the sort of kind solution? And the answer, of course, is that there isn't a single kind solution. This is one of the things I feel like there's always the hostage to fortune thing. Always is going to come back, right? Well, that wasn't very kind. And I've had that specifically in relation to it. I thought you're supposed to be doing the kindness person, right? I mean, high risk, I would say, honestly. But I always say, actually, asking the question is really important, because the reality is, of course, like you were saying, what's kind in the short term might not necessarily be kind in the long term. What's kind to one person might not necessarily be kind to everybody else. There's always going to be that balancing act. And it's not just looking at one action in isolation in terms of one person and another person. It's looking at the whole context, and sometimes the historical context, sometimes the political context. What's the general social political context in which we're all operating? We need to have that in mind. But I completely agree with you, Liz. It's about making sure that we're asking those questions when we're talking about policy, specifically, actually, when we're talking about policy. To me, very often, the question doesn't even get asked because people think there's no room for it. Like kindness is like a luxury, like it's a bonus. We don't have time for that because actually we've got limited resources. We've just got to be efficient. We've got to have a really good value for money. Just do this. And we don't even ask the question. And yet I think, and we are beginning to do that, I think, here, and certainly in other organizations, I've seen it as well. People are beginning to ask the questions, and I think that's a huge step forward.
Right, we have a question just here. You can wait for the mic. One down, coming from this side.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I remember earlier in my career, I used to stay in a bed and breakfast in the Midlands as part of meetings that I was going to, and I got to know the owner, who'd actually been a successful businessman and had sold up to run what was a very kindness-based business, which was bed and breakfast. But he was very kind. It was very kind. It's a lovely place to say. But he used to say to me over and over again, this mantra: kindness is seen as weakness in business. Kindness is seen as weakness in business. Liz, you were mentioning lack of upstream examples from senior people in government. Is this a factor? The fact that people are afraid that if they show their humanity, if they show their kindness, it's going to be seen as weakness. And not only that, particularly in government, it's going to be seen as some kind of a spin, some kind of a trick, some kind of a con, and it's going to be a negative outcome.
Nikki, in workplaces, do you think perhaps in particular there's this fear of seeing that kindness can't lead to success and that it's weak?
I think there is a sense of that kindness is used to get something. I mean, how many times I've seen people talk about the criticism sandwich, that say something nice before you deliver the negative. And I met one lady who told me her boss did that all the time. So every time she got a compliment, she waited to get kicked. Is it seen as a weakness? I think it is in some cases. I think the public sector is starting to shift. The NHS obviously shifts quicker because their whole ethos is around compassion, and it's part of their whole reason d'etre is compassion. There's still a sense that actually compassion is weakness, yet you mentioned earlier, Claudia, about if you've got someone in your team who's underperforming, not addressing that is not kind, because you're not helping that person, you're not helping the people who are picking up the slack. So I think gradually people are starting to realise that you can, it's a yin and yang, you can be soft and hard and be kind at the same time.
No, very nice answer. There were lots more questions. Yes, there's one over here, and then we'll go to over there. Okay.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Natalie Edelman from Brighton University, and I would love to analyse your data set. So my work is mostly sexual and reproductive health research, and a variable, and I'm a sort of social epidemiologist, and fascinatingly, I've discovered that functional social support, so actual, people, somebody washing the dishes, helping you get out of bed, is predictive of all sorts of variables, both sort of within sexual and reproductive health and outside of it. It even predicts how likely you are to have sexually transmitted infection. Like actually it's protective. So there's obviously some interesting intervening variables going on. And I'm interested in whether or not you looked or measured functional social support. So that for the difference between acts of kindness in terms of giving somebody a ring, checking in with them, versus those sort of more functional forms of social support. Because again, this issue around time comes into mind, and I think about class and all sorts of things that might be to play there. And I also wondered, I was really interested to hear that there's been little work done on what it's like to receive kindness. But for me, certainly from my own reflections, I think a lot of it is around experiencing connectedness, connection and belonging. And you get that whether you're doing the giving or the receiving. So I was also wondering whether you try to measure, pick up on connection or belonging.
And so, Robin, those would be good ones for you to answer. Before you do, so have I got this right? If someone washes up, if someone is doing the washing up for you, you're less likely to get the sexually transmitted disease.
Yes, not more.
Okay.
That's one way of
Robin, functional social support.
I mean, clearly there's a task to do. I mean, we have something like 9 million data points in this data set. It's enormous. So we've got a job on our hands and we're still doing the analysis. So I want to dig into it. But yes, is the answer to the question. We did ask about different ways of experiencing kindness, both giving and receiving. Giving was one of the things that, we talked about giving. That's clearly one of the dominant ways in which people are kind. But also, as well as giving or doing something for someone, actually one of the things which was really common, and I don't know where this would fit in because I guess this wouldn't fall into that category. It's not the same as doing the dishes. It's not that kind of act, but it was predictive of well-being as well. And that was saying something. Many people talked about saying something as being the act of kindness that they had received. I was really intrigued about that. To my mind, there was something really powerful that spoke to me about conversations and communication with each other. And I don't know, where would that sit? Because that is different from what you're talking about. That's not the same as the functional social support. But to me, it was really important because we've done lots of work on conversations in children and how in a school system, going back to the school context, actually over the last sort of several decades, it's been harder for us to recognize the value. This sounds really strange to say, but those of you working in schools will know what I'm talking about. It's really hard to see the value of talking, because often talking in schools is seen as off task and not good and not appropriate. And one of the things we've been trying to do is say talk more, connect more, communicate more. So I haven't answered your question. I've just added another question, but I wonder where that business of communicating verbally and connecting with each other and having a conversation would fit into that same inquiry.
Yeah. I want to fit in a couple more. Yes, there's one here, and then we'll have one here. You still got your question? Yeah. There's a lady in yellow. do wave so they can see.
Just this comes from what Liz was talking about, and just the idea of lack of time, support, being hugely under pressure, and lack of government confidence. I've had an effect where probably been working in the NHS for 17 years, and just her feeling of crisis within that organisation. The vindictiveness that is going on, and she's a hugely honourable person, and yet she feels she literally cannot carry on. And this is a very challenging idea, because we see the NHS, we hugely respect it, and yet what is happening is it's being dismantled in front of our eyes. And the people who are still on the front line are not being respected in any form at all. And so where your researchers for this kindness, how that can be applied to this kind of area.
Yeah, so I think your work in the end will be able to be applied to the NHS, you would hope.
We hope so.
Yeah. Just, I guess
Yeah, so I just want to respond to that, because I think there's the kind of giving we explored with people was kind of not easy giving, but it was not about giving and then having things being exploited for that. And I think you're drawing our attention rightfully to where the most intense giving took place during the pandemic was frontline workers, in particular health workers. And as you say, that's another side of this, that the kind of dyssynergy becomes more of a violence, doesn't it, at that point? And so we have to think about those more intensive encounters where give, compassion, and literally big boots coming down in your face. And I think that's much more than dyssynergy. That's much more collectively we can do something about this. That is a kind of state violence, I would say, in those situations, which is terrifying and terrible for those people.
So we have one quick question from just here. Could you wait? Could we have the mic over here? And are there any urgent questions in the chat? Which I have.
So there's been a lot of talk about why we aren't kind sometimes, what the barriers are. I'm wondering about whether it takes courage to be kind, quite often, and also a kind of emotional intelligence.
Robin, quick final point from you on that.
Quick answer.
Answer to courage to be kind.
In the work on kind culture in schools,
Yeah.
I've actually heard exactly that. Head teachers feeling that they had to be courageous, that exact word, in order to do that. And I just think that's a bit of an indictment of our society at the moment, that they had to be courageous to invest time and energy in a kind culture. And we have to do something about that. And I guess maybe that's what we need to do at the moment, is to actually collectively support each other to take that courageous step. But surely we need to get to a point where it's not requiring courage, where it's just how we are together.
That's a very nice point to end on, I think, there. Well, thank you very much to our panel, to Robin.
Oh.
If it's 10 seconds, or we're going to run over.
Thank Robin for, getting all this kindness thing going.
Oh,
I don't know if any of you know that the government spent about 800 or 900 million on advertising for something to make us aware of COVID. Yeah, so about 800 or 900 million pounds spent through ad agency to get make us aware of COVID. You're all aware of that. I personally, not that my opinion is that the government, what we need to do is we need to make kindness really hip and trendy. It needs to be like everywhere. So we almost need to get government to fund, say, starts you, or someone to say, we're going to spend, a billion on creating a kindness advertising campaign for say 2 years.
Campaign for kindness.
Newspapers, it's on BBC, there's a kindness show. And as with university, it's an amazing place, but don't have to get kindness on mapping, or we can make this university really famous if we fill the university visually with kindness everywhere. On the buildings, a kindness newspaper, make it, because kindness is like, it sets our heart alight. We're all bursting with kindness. We're all born with so much kindness. We've got thousands, tons inside us, but as some people say here, when we put it all
Yeah.
kind of, you go out very kind every day, it's life changing.
Well, let's make, that's a lovely point to end on. Let's make kindness hip. Thank you for that. But thank you very much to,
So I just have a couple.
yeah, I was going to thank them and hand to you, but,
Okay.
yeah, but you kind of like,
I'm gonna thank him.
okay, you can thank them. We all want to thank.
Oh, so much kindness, right? What have we done?
Yeah.
So just to wrap up, I just want to, if you want to reach us, we have the best email address, kindness@sussexcity.com. If you go to our webpage, we have a mailing list. If you want to keep informed about other events that we're having. Our lovely ODL students, the online distance learning students, Rona's in the back there. So if you want to have a little hangout at the back, we'll meet up over there. And James is going to set up a breakout room for Zoom people. If there's any ODL students still on Zoom, if anyone wants to talk to them, welcome to do that. And then just to finish up with a bunch of thank yous. So just Robin kind of mentioned this, but thank you to Kindness UK, who are the initial supporters of this work and encouraged us in the initial work that we've done. Thanks to PAIRS for their generous support to fund this research center and launch it as we're seeing it today. Thank you to Claudia and Robin and our whole lovely panel here. We have Town Books who's brought books. So if you're interested in buying Claudia's book or having her sign her copy, she'll do that after I finish rambling. Thanks to Stuart for doing photos for us, and Eloise that has done a lot of behind the scenes work and getting everything set up. And thank you mostly to all of you for coming.
Hey. Yeah, Gloria, how are we doing the book signing? And are we doing tea and coffee? Oh, right, okay.
So thank you. You held the space really, really well. And
It's very easy with you. Obviously. Jumped into it. That's what we like to see. I don't know if that's still on, Julian. I can't see. I'm afraid. Yes, yes. No, we don't. So, see you soon.